So this is, like I said, just a great chance for us to get together, to talk, to share some ideas, but then also to hear your feedback. So we'll kind of start there. On your note cards that are on your little inventory there, if you don't mind just sharing your name and the home school of your child, along with some of this other information, your email address. This is just a chance for us to see who's attending these. If you should enjoy what's going on today, which we hope you do, and you take away some useful stuff and you're interested in future ones. There's also a spot you can flip it over, and if you have any questions for any of us, we say something that maybe just doesn't make sense, or you have some things that were not covered, just please jot those down as we're going along. This is going to be very informal, so you can even just ask us as we're going along. It's just meant to kind of be a chance to talk and to go through some different topics. And then the other important thing is, like I said, as we brainstorm and take this feedback, since this is the first one we've ever done, back to our other counselors, other topics that you guys would be interested in kind of getting together throughout the year and learning a little bit more about, or talking about, or just discussing things you're seeing, things that you think might be helpful, just kind of discuss as family, as parents, things that are going on in Hempfield. So just jot some of those things down. You do have the PowerPoint there if you want to take some notes and move forward. So our first topic we picked here is really all about stressors. If you turn on the news, if you choose to go on Facebook these days, it's very easy to kind of get caught up in these stressors. And unfortunately, kids are always watching, and they're coming and waking up each day and maybe have those same stressors. So we picked this idea behind worries, behind anxiety, and that can be very diverse. There can be a lot of different types of worries and anxieties that young children are facing. We could actually retitle this, Helping Your Children Become Resilient, because a lot of the things that help kids to become non-worriers, or strategies to help them feel better or confident, are also things that help with resiliency. So what we're going to talk about today is really that idea behind what is a stressor, what is going on in our little kids' brains and minds and bodies, and how do we help them. So there's a book that I'm going to share with you guys. It's one of my favorite resources for families if you have older children, and it also is a great one that it parallels that, and you can actually read along with them. And it's called From Worrier to Warrior. Sorry. And like I said, it's a book for a parent and also for a student to follow along with. But one of the first pages in here, the author shared this, and the second a parent recommended this to me, and I read that, and I was like, that really connects with me. And it says, worry is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it won't get you anywhere. And that's really what we're seeing with a lot of our students is they have that movement, they have that worry going on, but unfortunately, it's just like sitting in that rocking chair. They don't get anywhere if they're not able to get past that. So, being someone who kind of grew up with anxiety myself and dealing with that, I feel like when we're working with children, there's a lot of opportunity to relate to that. Chances are, if you're sitting here right now, there's probably some part of you that has a certain fear or anxiety towards something. There's a genetic component to that. As I stood in line this morning getting this coffee, I pretty much went through all of my PowerPoint slides in my own body here, realizing the moment I walked into Sheets, I don't drink coffee. So I'm not quite sure why I volunteered for this task, trying to be nice, but that anxiety hit me as I stood there and realized I'm a grown adult and I have no idea how to order coffee. So as I'm looking for these boxes, and I don't even know how to describe these boxes to the young boy that's there, and he's kind of staring at me, I could feel my heart rate going up. And I'm looking at my time, and now there's a time constraint, because anything with worry, it's usually a future time-oriented thing. And now I'm wondering, and now I'm sweating, and how am I going to order this coffee? I need coffee in one of those boxes that you carry with a strap, I said to the kid. And he goes, I'm not sure what that is, sir. So, okay, now my heart's racing a little more. And he finally gives me and hands it to me, and I realize I have no idea how to put this together. Again, I'm kind of going through these emotions. And eventually I figured it out and get the coffee, realizing I hope you appreciate the type of coffee I got, because I don't even know what kind of coffee I put in there because I was in a fluster. But little moments like this build up our days. And I feel like I'm a pretty calm person because I've learned strategies over the years. But those types of stressors and anxieties can always come back, just like sitting in that rocking chair going back and forth. So, when we think about as adults, what are things that we've learned that have helped us kind of get past these fears? And how can we teach those to our kids so they understand? And it's kind of a balancing act. If you want to go to the next slide there.
Do you want to answer that? What do you guys see as some of the worries for students these days? What are some things that your students or your children are coming home and saying to you that they worry about or that they're concerned about?
That is gifted.
Okay.
She worries about doing well, failing. It's just this overwhelming fear of, and her grades are, she's doing very well.
Mm-hmm.
But she's so stressed, and it's not me. Like, I'm not saying you must have all A's. We don't even talk about grades.
Right.
She is so worried. And then last year PSSAs, it was like, what if I fail now? It's like, child, you can handle this.
Right, yeah. You're showing us all
Yes,
that
yes, you're fine.
Yeah.
Well, I won't get put in the highest math. And I'm like, you already are in the highest math, I know that, but she was so worried about PSSAs and failing that.
Yeah. So that idea of feel of failure,
Yes.
or not living up to her own expectations that
Yes.
she puts on herself.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Any other ones that kind of come home at times? Homework. And tell me a little bit more about like what the amount
it
becomes.
takes, the amount of it, did I do it right, did I follow all the instructions, did I miss anything, what kind of grade am I gonna get in, and having time to do other things besides homework.
My son is often worried about following rules, or that if he does something different, that, he's gonna get in trouble. He had a sore throat, so I wanted to put yogurt in his lunch, and he was very concerned he didn't want to put yogurt. He didn't want that in his lunch, but he's a teacher, and just worries that he's not gonna do something, or that he's gonna get in trouble.
Just lunch in general, that was a big stressor, not, my daughter's in second grade, this year's not quite as bad, but last year, even through the end of the year, just that, what if I have to buy it? I like to pack, but that fear of like
chance
having
of,
to
like-
get in the line and not knowing what to do, and so the whole lunch experience is, I think, maybe especially for the little ones.
So the
Kind
idea
of
that.
colored everything else for a while.
Okay. So kind of fear of the unknown and how does that look in that situation? And like Mr. Resh was in today.
Yeah.
Fear of the unknown of coffee.
Getting coffee when you haven't
Who
done
knew?
it
I had a fear
before.
of getting coffee.
Right.
And I think that's a good point because fears are ever changing and these worries are ever changing, and you might be the type of person that says, I don't understand, like, my child went through kindergarten, first grade, second grade, whatever it was, and they never had an issue with this, but now all of a sudden they do. Or they maybe changed, or they had a fear for this, but now it's this. And we even see that. I mean, I'd say for the past 4 weeks, I've probably talked to families, children, more about clowns than I've ever spoken about clowns in my life. And that's a situational fear that comes out of a lot of different avenues, and we won't get into all of that. But prior to that, it was the fear of coming to school because we were coming back from transition, and the start of school is always a crazy time when they're here for a day, they're not here for a day, and that really throws them out of whack, and dealing with separation anxieties, switching to situational anxieties, fears of things you didn't even know existed or as a fear, to things that are occurring here and there but not all the time. There might be a fire drill coming, there might be a storm. They might have heard a friend talk about this. A big one that we see more and more so is the fear of getting sick. They're around all these children and someone throws up, and that's a traumatic experience when you think of that whole experience,
Right.
seeing someone do that, but now they're scared. What if, not only am I going to get sick, but what if I throw up, and this and that, what if someone else throws up? And now their lives are kind of just thinking about these situational fears. So what we did is we sat down and we brainstormed and kind of looked over our notes. We do a pretty good job, Carrie and I, of tracking what are we working with kids on, because it's a great way to collect data, so that way we can create preventative programs and groups and lessons for teachers and resources for families. So we do a pretty good job on a daily basis coming up with our list of, these are the things that we're seeing the most in our schools in the past couple of years. So they're in no specific order, but we just put them up here just to kind of talk about, here are some of the worries in the elementary world. They might be worries in the middle school world. They might carry over high school. They might be worries that we face as adults. Homework. That's a big one. Is it a worry, or is it just a different type of stressor? Animals, teachers. Teachers is kind of an interesting one because there's a lot of comparison, especially for our children. you know, they have a teacher one year and had this experience, and now they have a completely different personality teaching style. There might be an adjustment thing, fear of that. Storms and weathers, drills, these drills that we do, you know, they're definitely important, but for a young child, making sense of why I'm doing this and why I have to get on the floor and put my butt in the air in the hallway one time a year, that's confusing. If the teacher does a really good job of explaining that, it's usually a pretty good job, but that doesn't always happen, and they might come home and share this detail, and you might not even know a drill happened that day, and now you're trying to make sense of this. Now you have your own anxieties. What's my child doing at school? Why were they in the middle of the hallway on the floor? School in general, like we see a lot of that in the beginning of the school year. It kind of goes through waves. Right now we're working on tracking a lot of information about what months do we see the most separation anxiety? Is it after a transition? Is it after a weekend? 2-hour delay, those types of things. At this point, we would like to see that a lot of the children have kind of settled into the transition to school. If they are still having some difficulties, then we know we need to give a little more support, because really the separation piece coming to school, it's all about consistency and getting a first probably 2-3 weeks of good solid school in so they know their routine. It's when they have those ups and downs, days on, days off, days here and there, their transitions change. They come by bus one day, they come by car the next day, they're not quite sure the schedule. That's where we see a lot of that pick up.
Snow days and 2-hour delays are
Yeah,
really hectic. We get into the
absolutely.
winter months, it gets a lot.
Yeah, it comes back, it resurfaces, definitely. Sickness, we talked about other kids getting sick around. There's been a lot of bugs and things going on in our school this year. Death and grief, that's always a kind of an interesting one, and touchy one to deal with, but like I said, we try to help educate kids about what's going on and work with the families to support them and give them resources, but there's always that very fearful thing that's going on around that, even with a pet. I think sadly, I've had more deaths of dogs this year than I've ever had in 7 years working in the building. I mean, 1 week I had, I think, 6 dogs that sadly had to be put down. It was hard for me, like, knowing, and that's the thing, I try to take into perspective what the little guy's going through, you know, and someone who lost a dog myself, and it's just, like I said, a situation, you don't know what every day is gonna bring, what the new fear is gonna be. Tests and quizzes we mentioned, you know, you hear that a lot from parents saying, you know, I don't really put these demands on my child. I don't understand why they feel like they need to be perfectionistic with these things. It's not like we're pushing them every day to do this. And that's a good conversation to have. Transitions, punishment, and safety. So these were, like I said, just a list that we kind of put together. It's not all changing. It's always changing. Yeah, it's all encompassing. Thank you. But we always could add to it, we'd always change it. We might show up to school today and there's a different thing. I mean, with everything going on in the media right now, that's another fear that maybe we will be addressing this week. As kids come in and talk, you know, Mr. Resh, who did you vote for? And those are things, because they're hearing, they're watching, we don't know what they're exposed to. But again, it creates some different things and conversations we never even thought we would be having with a kindergartner. And we do a really good job, I think, in our department of collaborating with each other, saying, hey, picking up the phone, emailing, saying, have you ever had a fear of water before? That was one last year I was doing. I was scared of water, petrified of water, wouldn't drink water, wouldn't wash their hands. I've never dealt with that before or had to call Carrie for ideas. So it's a thing that is always changing, and we don't always have the answers, but we try our best to figure out what is a strategy that's going to work the whole time.
And we will talk a lot, we talked a lot about what they are. We are going to spend some time talking about what those strategies are and what we do to help, because I think Mr. Resh said earlier, like, you may find that there is a worry and we're like, okay, we're good with that worry, and then something else might pop up. So it's all about learning how do we handle that and what strategies do we use to help us when the next one comes along. So just a quick look at some statistics, and if you take a look, it says 8% of youth ages 13 to 18 have been given an anxiety diagnosis, with symptoms typically starting at age 6. And we see them at 5. I've heard about them younger. I mean, I have my own children, and their worries they can start younger than 5 and 6. It's important to know that this only represents the amount that are being helped and have been diagnosed. I think we know out there's a lot of kids that aren't getting what they need for the anxiety or not being diagnosed. So that is a pretty small number, but again, I think a lot of parents and children are kind of living and trying to handle the anxiety. And about 18% of adults, or 40 million people, are affected by anxiety in a given year. It's definitely something that's on the rise. I've heard so much more about it in my 9 years of counseling. I've just, heard it, and I think even as adults, we have even more anxiety or worries than we would like to have at this point. And there's lots of reasons, and the news being a big one, and social media as another one. And as we talked about earlier with the rocking chair, it doesn't really help us. It kind of distracts from where we need to be and where we need to go. So that's our main focus can't be about this anxiety. It's what do we do with it, and how do we get past it, and how do we move on so we can be the best student that we need to be, and we don't have to be worried that I did my best on my test, I did my best on my homework. I will get through the lunch line, and it might be really scary, but how do I do that? Just important things to remember. Okay, fight or flight.
So a certain level of fear is normal, and it actually protects us. It's a protective factor. I'm sure you all heard of fight or flight. And it's there to keep us safe, and it's there to keep our kids safe. The thing that we need to remember is there's a difference between fear and anxiety, and these words to kids, I try not to even use them. I'll explain some of the other words I use in the future. But fear is something that it's immediate. You see something, and you see it, and it creates a reaction in your body because it's protecting you. Whereas anxiety is a future-oriented type of emotion. What if this happens? What if I get home and you're not there? What if I get to school and someone throws up? What if there's a fire today? So it's thinking in the future, which is then building on top of other things that are going on with the body, and now it's creating that anxiety. So with fear, like I said, a little level of fear is good because it's protecting us. When it kind of goes over and over and over and over again and turns into an anxiety, then it's dictating what our kids are doing, and they're sleeping and they're eating and their behavior is changing, their emotional states are changing, then we know we need to kind of approach it and what can we do for that. So it goes back to that whole fight or flight. This next slide I just added in here because I thought it was pretty cool. These are actual like descriptions from children who are trying to make sense of what is going on in their body. And you say, are you scared? Do you have anxiety? Do you have fear? Like, that may not make sense to them. Okay? It's like asking a first grader what time they're going to be home. Time is an oblivious type of thing. They can say, oh, I get them at 4, but that time meaning doesn't really mean too much to them. But these words are very descriptive, and I thought were pretty spot on with anybody who's dealt with fear or anxiety themselves. But like a heavy feeling sitting on their chest. Someone sitting on me is what one student actually said. Something that makes you feel a certain way. So they weren't actually able to describe what way they feel, but they just knew that it felt weird and they didn't like it. Something that makes you think a certain way, or something that makes you do or not do a certain thing. So avoidance. I didn't do that because I was scared this would happen. It might happen. And when we have conversations with kids, I think it's really important that you listen to those little fine details because it can really help you to figure out which way you want to go in helping them. If there's an avoidance or if it's something else, that really affects how you're going to approach the situation.
And often when I'm working with students, it is really hard, especially for the younger students. The older students usually I can get to, but they're like, I don't know. I don't know why I'm crying. I don't know why I feel this way. I don't know. And that is frustrating to them. So not always asking those questions. Oftentimes if I have a student in my office that's really struggling and they're just feeling that, we just do something else. Because at that time we're not going to get anywhere, we're not going to find anything out because it's a very frustrating feeling when they can't identify what that is. So oftentimes we find some other relaxing activity that we can do together so they can find, or go back and revisit and try to find those words. And it helps me think about, okay, what questions, I know a little bit more, what other questions do I need to ask to try to find out what is really going on? And just be a little bit more specific. Okay, so just quickly to go over what it looks like. This is often what it looks like in schools, and it might look different at home and it might look the same. But we often have frequent trips to the nurse or the bathroom. We work very closely with our nurses in our building. All the counselors do. Luckily, we're close together where we're at. And oftentimes if there's a repeat student and there's just this, they don't know why, it's just a feeling, the nurses will come to us and ask us and say, look, I've been seeing the student, we're having trouble So we try to also piggyback and work with them about trying to get to the bottom of what's happening. Headaches, stomach aches, separating and being alone and refusal to go to school. As Mr. Resh said, we often see this in the beginning of the year and then after any break or any transition or difference in the schedule. Repetitive behaviors, picking of nails, pulling out eyelashes or hair. Trouble falling asleep, this isn't something we see at school. Maybe students that are having falling asleep in class because they're having trouble sleeping at night or even staying asleep. Mr. Resh had lots of what if questions, what if, what if, what if. And with students, you can play the what if game you can play that all day long. Maybe you see a change in the appetite, eating more or eating less. Changing what they like to do, their preferences or their interests. You might see them not want to try something, like they wanted to do soccer and then all of a sudden they don't, and they don't know why, they just don't want to do it. Feeling fatigue, out of energy, and trouble concentrating, or that idea that they feel like their mind is just blank. Those are things that we have seen and we've talked to families about. This is not an exhaustive list. I'm sure there's many other things that you could report that you hear and see. But some of these are just how the body is responding to stress and what it feels like to them and how they verbalize it. Okay. Kids have a lot on their plates these days. We shared a little bit. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to share? We have homework and lunch lines and just the idea of lunch in general.
We have a first grader right now, and she's always been kind of off on her own little planet as far as other kids go, and even as far as the teacher goes. And she seems to be having interaction with peer anxiety is going on more this year than we've seen. It used to be, come home from kindergarten, how was your day? Great. What happened? Nothing. What'd you do? Stuff. And for like the first month and a half of school, literally from the moment she got off the bus until like half an hour after her scheduled bedtime, about every single blow by blow, what happened on the playground, and who played with who, and who got mad with who, and who had how many. Shopkins? Yes. And we don't do Shopkins in our house. She doesn't watch TV. She only now, as of yesterday, has access regularly to a computer that's hers when she got her iPad. So, yeah, but there seems to be an and I have to put a stuffed animal in my backpack and keep it there. Well, why? We're not allowed to bring stuffed animals to school. Well, because the big kids are mean to us in the playground. And so there's a whole lot of that going on that this is the first time we ever had any of.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that wasn't something that we talked about there, but that level of social anxiety they might have.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not knowing how to interact, but sometimes just overwhelming. And there's so many personalities within a classroom, and every year that changes, and there might be a new boy that you hear about in this classroom. There might be this other girl that's in this classroom. And having to kind of talk to them, not only getting limited details about what actually is happening there, is sometimes difficult, but there's how do I approach a group, especially the group that has strong personalities. You don't know really what's going on there, so that is a pretty stressful type thing, or just even being in a large group. The playground when there's hundreds of kids out there playing and everyone's doing their own thing.
And there's
It's a
different
difficult
ages
thing too. Absolutely, yeah.
And I think a lot of that comes to personality as well, because with your daughter, it sounds like she probably has a high emotional intelligence, where she has that social awareness. So she's keen and picks up on those things, whereas, another child might be totally oblivious to some of that stuff, and that's personality too. So I think helping your daughter to establish that security and comfort with, who she is, what she does, and that's good, that's okay. And so that's another thing that we could help look at with the social awareness, emotional intelligence, things like that. And I'm Melissa Bose, I'm a school counselor in the district as well, I'm the guidance supervisor. So I just figured I'd just put that out there.
You're in the background.
Yes.
To that point though, I think, and this is just kind of my own, I guess, viewpoint on that, is I find that, especially in my age group that I work at, K through 3 in my building, is that students who I would describe as hyper-vigilant, meaning that they watch. They know when that teacher sneezes. They watch when someone comes in and out of the room. Not that they have ADHD or anything like that, because they're confused by that, but they're just very in tune to their environment. also tend to have a higher level of stress or anxiety with them because they just have so much that they are trying to work out in their brain and make sense of, whereas other students might be kind of oblivious to that and not even realize that the teacher stepped out for 2 minutes to talk to another teacher in the hallway. So it kind of goes hand in hand there a little bit with how her day looks.
It seems that children are dealing with a lot more stress. There is a lot of academic demands, and I hear that and deal with it even with my own children at home, of what they're expected to do and what they need to do. And sometimes I worry, it's like, oh, can he do that? Can she do that? And we work through that together. But there's also family challenges that are hard, economic demands. We see all different kinds of families coming together and how that changes the family dynamics. Also working and time away, and students, sometimes there's a change in the job or the hours of the job, and that can be very stressful for students. Environmental dangers in this media piece is big. Like even, we don't often have the TV on in our house, but when we do during this election, just even hearing some of those things, I just had to keep remembering, we have to keep the TV off because we don't need to hear some of these things that are going on. And the digital world as they get older, that is a big stress, and we do a lot of trying to help them in school. We do some lessons on cyberbullying, and we do spend a lot of time on that, and we know that there's a need there of how do we help them and support them so it's not a stress and they know how to handle it, and with their peers, and also school problems, being able to find friends, just like you're saying, where's my group, where's my mix, where do I fit in, and then from year to year that changes too. Like it worked this year, but all of a sudden it's all different this next year, and that can be very difficult for students. And the last piece is just really important, is that they're vulnerable because they don't always have control. And when I work with students, sometimes we just talk about that. What can you control and what can't? And then let's talk about what can we control and what we do with that. Because there's a lot of things that they can't control that are out of their control, and that can be very difficult. But when they see the things that they can, those are the areas that we really try to work on. So.
I think there's also the stress of having to be a good friend, to defend other people. I think that all of us have gifts, and I think that sometimes maybe your gift isn't to defend other people, but just to be there just in case. And I think that there is a lot of pressure for kids to always do the right thing, always defend other people, when they may not be able to physically or emotionally do that as well.
I hear what you're saying. When I go in and do my lessons with older students, I often talk to them about there are different ways of helping people, and you might be the kind that can stand up and just be there, and maybe you're not, but what else could you do? Is there another conversation you can have, and what does that look like? Because you're right, not everybody does have the same gifts and talents and how they present themselves, but if you do notice something, is there any small piece that you could do to help with that? But it could be another layer of stresses. Oh no, now I know this information, now what do I do with it?
Well, and I think of two different things with that. One, my mind went to bullying, and of course we teach kids, stand up to the bully, don't be a bystander, things like that. But then I think of my daughter, and she has friends who tend to be drama town. And then that's where the whole MYOB, like mind your own business, it doesn't matter, don't even talk about it, don't get involved in it. Like those are things they can work out on your own. It's not your job to make her be friends with her again, and doesn't pertain to you. So that's where I'm trying to teach her the skills of what she should be involved in, what she shouldn't be involved in, when to take a step back, things like that.
Okay, what are some of the strategies? You don't have to list them on your note card. You can just let us know. What are some things, because this is a topic we really need to get into, and we're running low on time, so we definitely want to spend some time here. We have good background, you know what it is. Most of you, if you're here, you're probably living with some form of anxiety with your student. But what are some strategies? Has anybody tried anything that is successful? Anybody here have anything they'd be willing to share?
The now 6-year-old, I started doing deep breathing with her
at bedtime when she was too wound up to go to sleep, and thinking of a mantra word. She likes peace and calm and singing when she would go to sleep. The fact that she was 3, those are not as effective anymore. One of the things, again, we've seen a lot of this whole anxiety. She had to put her to bed like 3 times. She keeps getting up and then another problem. And so I've gone back to do especially leg massages. She complains that her legs hurt. And the pediatrician says, yeah, maybe it's some growing pains.
Right, but
Yeah, the massages definitely help calm her down. I did that to my kids when they were infants, and then they got to a point where she didn't want one anymore. And now she's like really into her massages again, which she gets really one of those. So.
well, that's good. That's good. And you might find that the things, they work for a while and then they change. So you have to kind of grow with them as they grow. So what might have worked a couple years ago, not so much anymore.
Yeah.
Good. Other things that have worked?
I agree definitely with the deep breathing, visualization, and meditation that can take the form of prayer, or even exercise, doing joint compressions. My son would climb door jams, so he would do joint compressions, and then it would just kind of calm everything down. Push-ups, pushing against the wall, physical exercise.
Yeah, that's great. And I know one thing that we often do is just that breathing is so important, and it's something that they can do anywhere that they're at. And I know when I'm working with students, it's often, I just try to say, okay, let's just like, think about your breathing, because that's something they can do in their seat and not have to worry about other people knowing what they're doing. It's a quick strategy. Good, anything else?
I had another son in middle school now, but when he was younger, there were some troubles in the class in general, and I gave him a coin. It was just a raised coin we got at church, and he would put it in his pocket, and so when he was feeling upset or something like that, he was able to, when you have a coin and, I'm thinking about you and I love you and all that, he would rub his hand over the raised coin, and he had to go with him every day in his pocket for that school year.
And that's great, because that's another small strategy that he can do without anybody, recognizing it. That's great, and we have a few that we'll share with you too. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I really want to, but finding a strategy, you kind of think of anxiety as a gallon of milk, but we put it in our refrigerator, it's all in that nice container. Can you imagine what the milk would look like if it wasn't in a container in your refrigerator? That gives you an idea about anxiety. It's just there, and it can be all over if it's not contained, if it's not kept together. Think of it as a separate entity. When we're working with students, we give it a name, we give it a purpose, we give it, give it something that they can be mad at or that they can do something with. And then, letting them know that they're tired of posting it. Like, I'm not you, I don't need you on my back, in my mind, on my shoulder. Like, I don't need that. And, depending on the age, like talking back to them. We'll talk a little bit more about the worry monster. And then also competing demands, like you're saying, the idea of exercise, finding an outlet, finding something else to do that's going to distract, because distraction is a huge deterrent to anxiety. It doesn't make it go away, but it helps, and we'll talk about the strategies that help that, but it helps to get your mind off that is, and we're trying to stop replaying that record that's going on and on and on again. So finding something else to do.
So now the kind of nuts and bolts of here, and we want to make sure that you leave here saying, okay, a lot of that was a review, but maybe I can try this strategy. I've never heard of that before. So what we've done is we brought a whole bunch of resources, and feel free to come over here and look at them. And these handouts are in the front here for you to take with you. There's some different strategies in there, and then we have some of our resources that we use in our offices here. So I'm just kind of